In today's video, we are going to set up Jenkins to use LDAP as its authentication source. Are you new here? If you are, welcome. And if you are new here, you don't know who I am. My name is Darren Pope, and I'm a developer advocate for CloudBees. When you first start out with Jenkins, you might just use the internal user database that's inside of Jenkins because, well, you've only got 2 or 3 people. But eventually, somebody from security comes along and says, hey, stop doing that. You need to use our fill in the blank. And today, that fill in the blank is going to be LDAP. Why do you want to use a centralized authentication source? There's a lot of reasons why you would want to do that, but usually it boils down to business reasons. Somebody comes onto the team, somebody leaves the team, and then all of a sudden you're going through and checking things out. It's like, hey, this person left a long time ago. Why is there still a user account set up for this person? They shouldn't be able, even though they're not here, that account shouldn't exist. It's those kinds of things why you want to use a centralized authentication source. To get started today, let's go ahead and level set what we're going to be using. I have a Jenkins LTS instance that's 2.277.2. When it was installed, I used install suggested plugins. During the install suggested plugins phase, the LDAP plugin is automatically installed for us. And today it's at version 2.5. I also have a standalone LDAP server set up. If you're going to be setting up your own LDAP server, I don't have instructions for that. Go and set up an LDAP server, do it your way, however you want to do it. But that's what I have to start with today. So let's get started. Right now, this is just a fresh install of Jenkins 2.277.2. It does have a single user in it, so I've not integrated with LDAP yet. So I'm just logging in with the internal user database. And we can verify that by going to Manage Jenkins, Configure Global Security, and then under Security Realm, that's the authentication sources, you can see that we're using the Jenkins own user database. So that's where Jenkins admin is defined. What we're wanting to do is we want to move to LDAP. So let's select the LDAP radio button, and it says, hey, you need to give us server information. Well, that sort of makes sense. So I need to give it server or server port, or if you're using secured LDAP, LDAP-S server port. So I'm going to start out simple to begin with. And I am going to enter an IP address because I don't have a name associated with my LDAP server. You'll also notice in this right-hand corner down here is Test LDAP Settings. So let's go ahead and click on that, and let's see what happens. It gives us a box to be able to test out a username and password. So I have a user set up inside of LDAP named Sam. So I'm going to type in Sam, and Sam's password just happens to be Sam. So let's go ahead and click on Test and see what happens. You can see here that the authentication failed for Sam. It's like it may not exist. Does looking up your user details require a manager DN password? We'll take a look at that in a moment. It couldn't look up groups. So basically it's like, I can't get there yet. So what do we do? Well, let's go to our advanced server configuration. And let's take a look at the fields that are available for us to configure. Now, we don't have to configure many of these at all. In fact, really, we're only going to have to set up one of these for my specific LDAP server. But we'll take a look at a couple of the other fields just so you understand what you may have to do. So in my case, what I have to define is a root DN. Did I set up my LDAP server wrong? Do I not have my network set up right? I don't know. I didn't check it out to that level of detail. But I'm going to set up a root DN. Now, if you're not an LDAP administrator, you're looking at this and going, I don't know what this is. That's okay. Your LDAP administrator will know what this means. So if you're not administrating your own LDAP, talk to the person that is, and they can give you what the root DN is for your LDAP configuration. Once you have that set up, I want to go ahead and select our test again. But before I do that, I want you to understand a couple of things. There is a default for both display name and for email address. And it's expecting that the attribute that lives inside of LDAP is display name, for display name, all lowercase, and then mail there. Your casing, you may be case insensitive, you may be case sensitive. So just on the outside chance it is case sensitive, make sure that the attributes that you have defined here match what the attributes are inside of LDAP. So if inside of my LDAP it was display name upper N, then I would define that here. But inside of my LDAP server, I have display name just like it's defined right here, and I also have mail. Let's go ahead and click on Test LDAP Settings. Again, I'm going to use SAM and SAM, and let's click on Test. What you're going to see here now is I have a bunch of green checkboxes. Authentication was successful, user ID SAM, I received my user DN, I have the display name, I have an email, I also have the LDAP group memberships. All of this worked as I wanted. However, as I define this, you'll notice the only two things that we have defined, that weren't already predefined for us, was the server and the root DN. What this means is my LDAP server allows anonymous queries. In your case, you may not be able to do that. You may have to provide a user in order to even query against LDAP, which is not an abnormal thing to see. So what you would do in that case is you would define a manager DN and a manager password for that. Now notice that it says manager DN. That is a hint to you that it's just not a username. It needs to be an LDAP user, which is defined as CN and then the DCs for the rest of the definition of the user. So I also have another user defined within LDAP. When the LDAP server was set up, I created an admin user. So I can't just use admin. I have to define what the fully qualified manager DN is for the admin user. And then the password is just the password. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and click on Test LDAP Settings again. I'll type in SAM and click on Test. And if I scroll down a little bit more, again, everything was fine. I did not have to specifically define my manager DN, but I did just for your use case because you may not be able to make an unauthenticated query against your LDAP server. There are other fields here that I haven't filled in. You'll notice here that the user search filter is UID equals brace 0. There's also an empty user search base, there's a group search base and a group search filter. For my LDAP server, I don't need any of these fields because really it's just a small LDAP server. In the case to where you may have a very large LDAP server, meaning tens of thousands of users and tens of thousands of groups, you might need to do some tuning. Or if your LDAP administrators didn't follow what would be considered normal conventions to where you would have a top-level people and a top-level groups, they defined it to be something else, then you would probably have to do some changes to these search bases or maybe change a group filter. That's going to be up to your environment and how your LDAP server is set up. But for just simple use cases, this is all you really need. If when you're trying to integrate with your LDAP server, you're having problems, below this video, there are some links to some knowledge base articles to help you troubleshoot your LDAP configuration. If you're having any problems, go take a look at those knowledge base articles. Okay, so now that we have all this set up, let's go ahead and click on Save. But before I click on Save, I want to show you one thing. We're still logged in as Jenkins admin, and that's cool. But let's click on Save. I'm still logged in as Jenkins admin, and that's okay too, because I currently have a session under Jenkins admin. However, right now, my security realm is set up to be LDAP. So the thing to keep in mind here is when I made that change, I'm still logged in. I did not get automatically logged out from Jenkins admin when I clicked on Save. So let's go ahead and log out now. And let's log back in as Jenkins admin. And let's see what happens. And you can see here it says invalid username and password, or password. And the reason why is because of the change that we just made. Remember, we just changed our authentication source from Jenkins' own user database to LDAP. Jenkins admin is not a defined user inside of LDAP. But we do know a user that is defined inside of LDAP, and that is Sam. So let's go ahead and log in as Sam and click on Sign In. And we logged right in. In fact, you can see Sam appear in the top bar. Let's go ahead and click on Sam Smith. That takes us to the Sam Smith detail page. So we see Sam Smith. We see the user ID of Sam. And we also see the groups that are associated with Sam, which in this case is net device users. This is an LDAP group. Let's click on Configure. You can see here again, full name is Sam Smith. That's our display name. Think back to the LDAP attributes. Here's our email address, mail, from the LDAP attribute. And that's pretty much it from the detail page that's coming back from LDAP. If you're still using the Jenkins user database to authenticate users into Jenkins, and you have LDAP or Active Directory or some SAML provider available to you, I highly recommend that you make the change to use whatever your standard authentication source is for your organization. Lots of reasons to do that. I talked about them before, primarily business, not so much technical. But all it takes is one day for security to come around, and then your life is now turned probably upside down, doing unplanned work to try to remediate why these login IDs still exist. By integrating with LDAP, if your organization is using LDAP, all of that pain goes away. You're able to just use the authentication. You don't have to remind people to change passwords. All of those things no longer matter. Hand that off to LDAP. Let it deal with being your authentication source, and you go on being a Jenkins administrator. If you have any questions or comments on this video, you can reach out to us at CloudBeesDevs. If this video was helpful to you, give us a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to CloudBees TV yet, why not? Take a moment, click on that subscribe button, and then ring that bell, and you'll be notified anytime there is new content available on CloudBees TV. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.